Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Mom Project's Masterclass, The Growing Gray Area and Why It Matters to All Women. I'm Elizabeth Shackelford, and I am so excited to be here today with Neha Ruch, founder of Mother Untitled and the author of the forthcoming book, The Power Pause. Neha is on a mission to update and elevate the perception of stay-at-home motherhood in America, a rising thought leader, influencer, and sought-after speaker in the world of women, work, parenting, and identity. Neha's mindset shifts are shared widely by tens of thousands of women, including Mandy Moore, Kourtney Kardashian, Gabby Bernstein, and Joanna Goddard. Neha, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. That was such an interesting cast of characters.
It was, but it's amazing. And I've been such a huge fan of yours since I myself became a mother in 2019. And I am so excited to talk with you today about career shifts, pauses, and returning to the workforce, a subject that I know our TMP community is very passionate about. We work with our community and our customer partners like Meta, Intuit, and Amazon on returnship programs, also known as return to work programs. And returnships provide a way for people who have stepped away from the workforce to do just that, return. If you want to learn more about returnships, we will drop a few blogs into the chat. And before we dive into our conversation today, a few housekeeping notes. This session is recorded and will be saved here on LinkedIn and on YouTube. And we will have time for a Q&A at the end of our session. So feel free to add any questions that you may have for Neha into the comments, and we'll try to get to all of them at the end. Okay, are you ready to dive in?
I am.
Okay, good. We like to get things started with a quick kind of get to know you. So tell me, are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird.
I am too. I'm like the most productive in the morning. Best book you've read recently?
I just finished Funny Story by Emily Henry.
Everybody is talking about that.
I know. And right before that, I just did Abby Jimenez's It's Only for a Summer or Only One Summer. So I'm on a rom-com kick. I really love happy content.
Well, and sometimes you need that when you're needed like escape. It's escapism.
Yes.
You need like a lighter book after, I finished The Covenant of Water recently and I was like, I need something light after that.
Yeah, I'm not into that right now.
Yeah. Favorite app?
Insight Timer and Melissa Wood Health. Both of those things, I'll do like a 10-minute meditation in the morning and a 20-minute yoga flow, and that's it for my day, all on my phone.
Oh, that's a really good also tip for Mental Health Awareness Month. So I'm writing this down. Best productivity hack?
Prioritizing Insight Timer and Melissa Wood Health. But if I had to add another one, I would say that recently when I go into an event, whether it be a dinner or a conference, or even time with friends, I'll go in with an intention as to how I want to show up and what I want to walk away with. And it really helped me sort of frame that time as productive.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And then at the Mom Project too, we talk a lot about superpowers. Moms have so many superpowers and, both soft skills and hard skills. So what are your superpowers?
I think one is empathy, and really understanding and overthinking, probably to a flaw, what everyone is feeling and going through. But then I think the byproduct of that is language and really finding the words to really describe those experiences.
And you absolutely do find the words to describe those experiences.
Thank you.
Tell us about your career journey and what led you to start Mother Untitled.
So, it's interesting because now my career feels so centered on Mother Untitled that if I were to look back, it's almost hard to remember life before that. But it started really in branding and advertising. And I started, ironically, in 2006, working at a small little social media boutique firm centered on mom blogs. Like that was my job, was reaching out to mom blogs. And then I ended up moving into digital strategy into another larger agency. And I really thrived in advertising and on the strategy side, and ended up going to Stanford Business School, not really knowing exactly what I was going to do, but ended up landing what I thought was my dream job, which was running brand at an early stage company. And then I had my first son, and it was New Year's Day of 2016, and it was the height of the lean in movement and the girl boss era. And yet something about those early months with him just felt like they were revealing a side of myself that I really wanted to connect to.
Mhm.
It was sort of a simpler, less ego-driven side of me, and I clearly must have been yearning for it, craving for it, because I decided initially to downshift into consulting. So I went part-time at a smaller tech company, 2 days a week running their brand strategy, and the rest of the time I was at home. And, it was interesting, even then, before I fully paused, I was gobsmacked by the incredible amount of stigma and shame that I felt from culture. Everyone from family to friends sort of feeling like I was in some way turning my back on the lean in movement and giving up on my ambition or giving up on my feminism. And meanwhile, I felt like completely opposite to that. I think
Mhm.
something about those days at home were unlocking in me a different level of curiosity and interest in the intellectual labor of raising children and thinking about values and what the world was going to be like. And I was meeting incredible women on the playgrounds, in play spaces, in baby groups that were similar to me. They had clocked in 10 years in their career. People were having kids much later than they were in the 1970s. They had really equitable relationships with their partners. So even though they were choosing to pause or downshift, they weren't sort of defending tradition. And they were really interested in enjoying this time with their children where they needed to because of finances. And all in all, none of it matched the portrait of the stay-at-home mother that we were getting served up, right? None of us were
Mhm.
sort of like shut in, buried under laundry, maybe a little bit buried under laundry, like teetering
Right.
around the apron, serving our husbands cocktails at the end of the day.
Yes.
And I realized that there was just nothing representing sort of this modern, dynamic, collective image of the
Mhm.
ambitious women choosing to lean into family life. So I started Mother Untitled basically a year to the day of my son being born. And it's been growing ever since as a platform rewriting the narrative about women on career pauses.
Well, and speaking of rewriting the narrative, what tropes do we need to leave behind when talking about career pauses for family life?
I touched on a couple just now, but I think, the first and foremost is we were raised in a generation where feminism was very closely tied to career progression and salary gain and the pursuit and power found in money. And I think one of the hardest parts for so many women when they step into a period of career pause or downshift is the self-questioning of, am I giving up on my ambition? Am I giving up on my drive? And am I giving up on my feminism? And the reality is that when these sort of definitions came to be, it was really at the height of media, the advent of media and
Mhm.
let's call it TV and these portraits of women, right? And it was really, I think back to the second wave of feminism where we wanted so badly to show women's capacity in the workplace, but what we did is then we really created this polarizing chasm between the quote unquote woman in the home and the woman in the workplace. So you had the woman in the home with the apron strings and the woman in the workplace that looked like Diane Keaton in a power suit with a baby from
Yes.
Baby Boom. And suddenly you had this huge power chasm. And these are all fictional characters. And we never really updated the narrative that actually real life is much more fluid. It's much
Mhm.
more gray. And, when I talk about updating the narrative, it's that we now are sitting at a generation where we are having children later, right? We do have access to technology. So our reality as women is that we may have already accrued a lot of work experience by the time we have children. So now
Yes.
if you define ambition more fluidly as the act of doing and caring about a lot of different things over the course of our life, mind you, also retirement is much later. So career is a much longer game.
Mhm.
Then it's the act of sort of recalibrating what matters right now and trusting that we can stay connected and sort of revisit and recalibrate on an annual basis. And so I think that one of the biggest tropes is that because I think that it creates so much internal shame and stigma.
Mhm.
It sort of really prevents women from being able to navigate this stage of life if they do choose to pause or downshift with more confidence and more empowerment. So, to that end, I think the other piece is that there's actually such an incredible amount of possibility in this stage of life, right? I think for so long, a career pause has been considered the death knell of your career. It's been considered a career ender, when what we're really finding is that whether you are fully in a pause and you're really in the day to day of caregiving, you're growing so incredibly much, as we often talk about both our platforms, just in the soft skills and the hard
Yes.
skills, by the way, of managing
Hmm.
households, managing children. And I think we all know parenting is more complicated than ever before. So it sort of ignites a whole different level of
Yes.
growth. So if you did nothing else, you would grow during a career pause. And so that sort of upends this idea that a pause is stagnant. Then there's this other side, which we know, and we commissioned a survey last year called the American Mothers in Pause Survey, where we polled 1,000 members of the general population and 1,200 mothers in career pauses and downshifts. And what we know is that the majority had their hand in something else, right? So volunteering,
Yes.
online certifications, hobbies, and creation, influencing. There's such a wide range of other things. And so I would say that that's a really interesting way to sort of walk through this stage of life, as also an opportunity not only to grow personally, but also to explore what could come next. And I think that that's the real sense
Mhm.
of possibility that is too often missed when we're thinking about a pause. And I think the last thing I would say is the part that we'll get to later in the conversation, that you know caregiving is real work and that demands real support. And I think for too long we've sort of considered it something that can easily be outsourced and or like anyone could do. The reality is, not only is this immense physical labor, and we talk a lot about sort of the laundry and the dishes, but the reality is it's immense intellectual labor, emotional labor.
Absolutely.
Truly, if you have ever spent a week with a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, or in my case, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, it demands, it warrants breaks. And I think this idea of changing the narrative that just because you're not doing paid work doesn't mean you don't deserve support. And I think if
Yes.
we fundamentally abandon that belief, we allow and empower women to get the support they need, whether that be from family or whether that be from paid help, to be able to unlock that possibility we talked about before.
Yes, all of those things. And I think when you talk about a pause, it's not stagnant. I think some people fail to realize that. And I think hiring managers are also starting to see
Mhm.
that you're not stagnant. You are volunteering, and your research speaks to it. Women are doing so many things. When you're at home caregiving, you're not just doing that. We're plural people. And so we have to be able to have our hands in other things as we're kind of figuring out what that looks like, and being able to navigate the possibility of taking that pause and what that looks like. And
Mm.
I'm sure for some women, and for me, definitely, it's like my attachment to my career. uh, It's really, really hard to untangle that when you become a mom, and you're battling, what that looks like to be fully present with your kids, but you also feel like very empowered in your career, and it means a lot to you. I struggle with that all the time. Like, well,
Mhm.
if I was ever to take a pause, how would I grapple with that? And I think what
Mhm.
you talk about is that, finding the possibility and what that looks like, and finding that ambition and
Mm.
the connectivity when taking that pause and untangling the stigma of your career is tied to who you are and your worth.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting because I say that, and it's not to say it's not hard. I think
You're right, it's so
if
hard.
we validate that identity shift is massive, and it's very normal. We interviewed a grief counselor for women in transition about what is it like to part with that identity of your professional title, because it is, for many women, it feels like they're
Yes.
mourning a sort of stage of their life, and I think women feel that to varying degrees. um, but I think we have gotten used to, in this culture, equating our worth and finding easy identifiers about who we are with what we do. So I'll give you an
Yes.
example. If you asked me, what do you do 8 years ago?
Right.
I would say, oh, I run brand at a tech startup. In that one pithy sentence, I was able to communicate so much about myself, right? I run brand. That
Yes.
means I was in a leadership level. Brand, that's cool. At a tech startup, that means I'm kind of like with
That's
it.
cool too.
Right?
Yeah.
I was able to communicate everything about what I wanted to say in that one sentence. Cut to like a year later when someone said, so what do you do? And even though, we have scripts for how do you own this with confidence, I should know this, right? And I said, I'm right now I'm focused on my family life. It still takes a minute for, to unlock the confidence gleaned from what does family life mean?
Yes.
What does that level of focus mean about who you are and how you spend your day and what your worth is? And that is something, no matter what the words are, you have to feel really
Yes.
confident in. I will say, you'll notice when I answer that question, I say right now, because I do think that is a gift to all women, no matter what they're choosing, whether they're choosing to work out of the home for pay, stay in the home, work somewhere in between. This idea of saying right now just takes the pressure off. Everything, every decision, even with you and your partner and how you're sharing a load at home.
Yes.
If it can be just for right now, this is what's making it all work. It takes the pressure off.
Oh, I love that. Just for right now.
Mhm.
You don't think, just stay in the moment.
Or give
Well, it's
yourself
kind of
permission to come back to it, right? Because
yes, like it's
I
not,
think
it's
that
not,
none of it's
yeah,
fixed and finite, and I think it speaks to that sort of second trope, this idea that it's permanent.
it's
This is
not permanent. We can,
the
yes,
whole conversation in the gray area in
yes.
general is this idea that we're actually all existing much more in a fluid, vast in between.
Hmm.
And if we
Yeah,
can sort of embrace that fluid, vast in between, and this idea of recalibrating over and over, we can make the right choice for right now with less penalty on the other side, and hopefully less
yes,
shame and sort of intense feelings about it.
yes. I remind myself all the time that all the time. And I think too, especially in motherhood, as you know, these phases happen with your kids, you're like, this is just a phase. And I think you have to remind yourself, like, this is just a blip in time. This is a blip. When you think about it 5 years from now, it is a blip. So
Mhm.
it's just for right now. And sometimes it's hard not to stay like weighted in the reality of where you are at the very moment, and that's going to be forever. But it's just, life is so fluid, careers are so fluid, motherhood is fluid. It's just it's all, you're not going to exist in one place forever.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, and I would love to hear what, your advice for how can women stay connected both personally and professionally during their pause.
So I think the first thing to remember is that this is not just about raising your children, right? And I
Mhm.
think so often when women step into a chapter of stay at home motherhood or a chapter of career downshift for family life, the number one success metric becomes raise happy, healthy children. Right. And obviously that's fair.
Yeah.
When we ran the American Mothers on Pause survey, it was incredible to us how many with that, in the top three, it was raise healthy children, raise happy children, have, happy marriage. Last on the list of things women reported was be mentally well. It was tied with having a clean home. And so at the top of Maternal Mental Health Month, I want to say that we cannot raise mentally and physically well children without being mentally and physically well ourselves, right? And so um, I think it's really important that when we step into these phases of career transition for family life, whatever that looks like, that we're also setting our own goals for ourselves and for our families, but also, what does success look like for us over this year? And if we can say, okay, I want to stay connected to my network, or maybe it's something small like I was in marketing, I'm really interested in um, medicine, in health and wellness.
Yeah.
I want to start, reading something once a day about this completely other field. We see so many women, and I'm sure you see this often as well, 67% change, right? The reason pivots are so common among women after career pause is one part because they're looking for completely different things. They're looking for autonomy, they're looking for less stress,
Hmm.
they're looking for more flexibility, but they've had time, if they afford it for themselves, to sharpen their perspective, think about what interests them. So I would say number one is set your own goal. And that goal can be quarterly, that goal can be on an annual basis, and it can be, just like SMART. Everyone has their different acronym for goals, but SMART,
Yeah.
measurable, action oriented. And I think if you can pick one thing and hold yourself accountable to it, it lets you feel like you're forward moving. So
Hmm.
that's number one. Number two is know that you'll have different pockets of time available to you. So say your kids are older and now they're in school, and now you have either the school hours available to you or the school community available to you. You might now start to think about, okay, what are some feelers where I can test and learn in some areas that I'm interested in? And if you're looking for clues as to what you're interested in, if you really do want to start over and you want to use this time, do the personal inventory. We have personal inventory worksheets on our site. I'm sure you do as well. This idea of using this time to get to know yourself. Your superpowers? What are the things you care about that light you up? What would flexibility look like for you if you were to go back? You don't have to design your path back, but you can use this time to check in with
Yes, be
yourself
thinking.
and be thinking.
Hmm.
And, maybe I did this, you can do just like a once a quarter, once a year check in with yourself, or on a weekly basis, just note down anything that piqued your interest. Once, we did a series with a creative teacher named Jill Elliott, and she gave the advice, if you're on Instagram and you have social accounts, use your Instagram to see what accounts you follow, because it's usually the content you consume, the blogs that you read, the LinkedIn accounts that you follow, they usually leave clues as to what you're interested in, right?
Yeah.
And so use this as a time to really get to know yourself and sharpen your sense of both self but interest. And then I would say start testing and learning in different formats. And there's no better a place to do that than volunteering in your school system, in your community. I know this great story of a woman who, really just decided to cast a wide net in the school. And she really took on a variety of different positions over a couple of years. And finally, she realized the one she gravitated to was event planning. She'd been a software engineer before, and she segued back after a 7-year pause into events, which was a corporate event specifically. And she wouldn't have known that without sort of casting that net. I also think so often we sort of bow out of our professional networks as soon as we take a pause or a downshift.
Hmm.
But I think investing in those relationships, because just like your skills don't die, your network doesn't die.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I love that we're doing this on LinkedIn, because I think it's an important place to note that this is
Hmm.
a fabulous tool to keep, even if it's just liking your old colleagues' content.
Yes.
Yes, congratulating them when they make moves. In the end, the majority, I think you would know the stat better than I would, but I think it's 85% find jobs through their personal network, right? Like,
Yes.
and I think
It's
as you're
all about
figuring out
all about who you
your
know.
way back, connections are everything.
Yes.
So, all of this ladders back to, the reality is you can't invent time, but figure out what it is you want from this time. And then with the hours you have available to you, whether that's per week or per day, you can test and learn in small ways. And it doesn't have to be taking a course right away, like many women do. It doesn't have to be sort of going to a workspace and testing out ideas. It
Right.
can be taking little steps.
Those truly are such tangible takeaways that I think you have to just, those are so easy. I think, well, in my mind, I mean, they feel attainable. I think you can easily do those once a week and kind of just have a gut check with yourself about what inspires you. And I love the story about your friend who was the event planner. And I would love to be a fly on a wall when she went into that interview and talked about her soft skills and what she did during her career gap and how she really created that story to land the job. And I think that's such a thing that we talk about all the time, is like that narrative of what you did on your career pause and how you stayed connected to your network, whether that's professionally or personally. I mean, it all leads you to where you're supposed to be.
Well, and I would also add, when you're noting down the little things that are catching your interest over even if it's like a folder or a Word doc that you're just, or
Mhm.
I usually keep things in
Or
drafts and
just a note. Yeah.
just, unorganized, disorganized. But, you know, I think one of the other things to remember to do is write down those little tasks or projects that you are proud of, because sometimes it's coaching your partner's business. Like how, so
Yes.
often in a two-parent household, if one parent is working more out of the home, the other parent becomes their informal advisor. That counts as
Yes.
part of the sub-bullets, right? If you lend your skills to a friend who is building their business, that counts also. And so also just taking stock of those along the way, because while I wasn't in the room when that woman returned to the workforce, I can guarantee she talked about her volunteer
Exactly.
experience. And while she really owned her time away from the traditional workforce, she really talked about it as a portfolio of experiences that, yes, included the soft skills that come from running a household and dealing with a
Mhm.
whole family relocation and all those things. But she didn't shy away from including the sub bullets from
Yes.
online certifications, networking events, um, and volunteerism.
Mhm. Well, and on that note, we get lots of questions from our community about returning to work after a career break or pause. What does the research say about parents returning?
Well, the research says a lot these days because it's
Yeah,
such
it's nuanced,
the
right?
research seems like it's changing every day, but I'll tell you our
Yeah.
research, the American Mothers on Pause survey, what was fascinating was that the number one thing women wanted when they returned was to continue the level of flexibility that they had come to enjoy in their time with their children. It is very hard to part with that once you've had that.
Yes.
Second to that was stress, was less stress. Salary came third, which says very clearly that women are willing to make very clear trade-offs, not blind ones, clear trade-offs to
Mhm.
optimize for more room for family life, which is an interesting, as employers start to think about how do we bring women back into the workforce, um, I think it's crucial that they understand that women are also evaluating flexibility in a whole spectrum of different ways, right? So for some people, flexibility means part-time, that it's a structure that they're 2 days on site and they can block and schedule. For some women, it's fringe hours and being able to work um, after the kids go to bed and it's completely autonomous work. And for some people, it's about having more headspace. So you can, sometimes freelance or consulting or contract work isn't the best for someone who's optimizing for less stress. And maybe we've interviewed some women who said, I just chose not to go back to a managerial role. I
Right.
didn't want that stress. I wanted a 9 to 5 because to me that felt more flexible than trying to hustle for freelance clients. And I didn't want the stress. So I chose for a job that was more autonomous. So I think what's interesting is, yes, in broad strokes, women say they want less, they want more flexibility, more time, and less stress. But I think that means something to different
It's
women.
different for everybody.
And I
Mhm.
think it's really important to audit what that means for yourself so that when you go in, you can make the very clear ask, because at this point, no one's handing that over, right? Like, not many companies say, this is our perfectly curated path
Yes.
to flexibility that works for everyone. You have to somewhat go in with clear bullets of why you need something, what matters the most to you, and what you're willing to give on, right? Like, I'll give you the
Yes.
example of freelance, right? So many women in our community freelance. What you trade off there is benefits, right? So you're willing to trade off benefits for a freelance position. So knowing both what you're optimizing for and what you're willing to give on, I think in this sort of calculation around the gray area is a really important exercise.
Absolutely. We talk about that a lot. And we have a great blog post, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, about kind of the best pointers for finding flexibility, knowing that flexibility means a totally different thing to anyone and everyone. So we'll pop that in the chat too. And I'm sure you have resources on Mother Untitled too about kind of navigating flexibility and what that means to you, and then how to, carefully talk about that in an interview setting or, as you're
Yeah.
exploring what that looks like in your return to work journey.
Then negotiate for it and make sure that the company really, flexibility means something not only different to different women, but different in different companies, right? And so
Yes.
talking to employees as much as possible within the setting, but also, I think it means something different in different industries. And that's important to know. If you're in medicine or law, or you're in
Yes.
marketing, very different. And I think seeking out mentors who have walked the path before or within the industry and have figured out ways in which to make it work. I think borrowing from proven models of success, even if it's outside of that particular organization,
Mhm.
is really helpful to be prepared with when you're negotiating a role or an opportunity that you're excited about.
Yes, and I would add too is like I think so many women are we've all kind of battled with that or figured out what that looks like for us. So don't be afraid to ask your friends or your colleagues or your peers or even people that you're connected with on LinkedIn of like, hey, can I pick your brain about flexibility? Because I have these questions about what that looks like for me and how I can talk about it. Because I feel like we've
Mhm.
all kind of experienced it. And even if we can't, speak to the exact right answer, we can all say, well, I tried this and this didn't work, or you can go this way. But I think it's really nuanced person to person. So
And talk
that's
about
something.
money, ask about pay, because I
Yes.
do think we as women would benefit from more transparency about how we're valuing our time. I think, the freelance consulting gray area that we're speaking about is also the wild, wild west sometimes. And I think
Absolutely.
combine that with if you are a woman returning to the workforce, we chronically undervalue ourselves under the best of circumstances. And then when we're returning from a career pause and we're thinking, okay, well, no, you have to value the perspective, the time efficiency, the organization that you have gained
Yes.
in these years away, as well as all of those other portfolio of experiences. And so understanding the market is such a crucial part um, of negotiating your way back because I think, women, yes, say they want more flexibility and less stress, but they want to know that the hours that they are leaving,
Yes.
that they are not in the home, are valued. And I think,
Absolutely.
as you know, the bar goes up when you have kids on how you're spending your time.
Yes. And you evaluate everything from like even after school, what that looks,
Mhm.
and it's just your time becomes, I know, I guess finite is there. Your time becomes more finite. You're like, yeah, this amount of time to do this, and then I gotta go pick up the kids, and then I gotta, it's just
Yeah.
it's a lot. And so you really have to prioritize and think about how we as parents become like expert multitaskers, being like, I have an hour and a half to get this done, and like guarantee you I can get it done. But the
Mhm.
time that it takes us to do something, we're using like all of this, earned knowledge to be able to do it quickly and do it efficiently.
Yes. And by the way, I think just to the point of specifically women returning to the workforce after a career pause, their accumulated knowledge from their work
Yes.
experience prior to their pause did not evaporate. Like, I think going
No.
back to the very initial trope we talked about, that your career pause is not a career ender, nor is it the death knell of your career. The reality is all of that work experience did not disappear. It has now been added to non-traditional experiences, and in my opinion, creates a really beautiful portfolio
I
of
agree.
um, that lends to an even um, more wise professional. Book
Agreed.
I would recommend is or person to follow on LinkedIn is April Rennie. Have you heard of her? She wrote the book
No.
Flux, and she's really presented this whole idea of a career portfolio. So I want to just credit her with that language. I'm very sensitive to language and making sure it's credited where credit is due. And she came up with this notion of the career portfolio.
I love it. Well, I will have to go look at that because we talk about that all the time. So this is a good thing for us to dive into too. At Mother Untitled, you talk about every phase of the pause journey from preparing, embracing life as a stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home mother, or being out of the paid workforce, blending part-time work with motherhood, and then returning to the paid workforce. In your opinion, what are the hardest phases of that journey, and what can moms do to prepare?
Mhm. No, I don't know if there's a hardest, right? Transitions are hard no matter what. And they can also be beautiful. And I think the gift is to know that it is ever shifting and ever evolving.
Mhm.
The most promising piece of data from the AMP survey was that 1 in 3 women are choosing to pause in the next 2 years. 1 in 2 are considering a downshift. 90% are considering returning to work eventually, right? All of this points to this unifying fact that we are more alike than we are different. And it is really ever evolving and ever shifting. So with all of that said, I think there are different sort of worries at different stages. When you're preparing, I think a lot of it is reconciling the big questions around finances and knowing, what is that going to feel like in our family if one parent parts with their income. For some, it's
Yes.
a colossal budgeting exercise, and for others, it's more about the sort of emotional sensibility of you know one partner no longer having a salary, and what does that
Yes.
mean about financial dependence. And I have a counter argument to that, which is if one partner is not working for pay, the other partner working out of the home actually depends on that partner for care. So it's
Mhm.
an interdependent organization. But all to say, part of going in with a plan and preparing is having those really big conversations. And that can be really challenging to, open that up,
Mhm.
open up money values, open up what we are willing to trade off on, open up those dynamics with your partner. Um, in the embracing stage, I think that's, you're really transitioning into a chapter of new family rhythms. And, that is boredom
Yes.
is real. You can only play with trains for a little while before you start questioning, like, did I do something wrong? And what I would say is, like, we've all been bored in our jobs. Boredom is normal. It's sort of a gentle nudge on your shoulder to say, okay, how can I redesign the rhythms to help them work for me? Maybe we, go to a play space so I can meet other moms in the morning. Maybe we go to the coffee shop, so that I'm having that interact, whatever that case may be. Maybe my partner comes home on some days so I get a break. And so, designing those rhythms takes a while. And so giving yourself that
Mhm.
grace around the identity transition, resetting how you're going to feel fulfilled during this stage is really important. Um, and then I think as you're blending and starting to explore what comes next, then there's a little bit of recalibrating. I call it the blessing and burden of the gray area, right? Which is what a gift to be able to hold on to personal and professional pursuit alongside family life and to uncover new projects that keep you feeling inspired or creative or connected, no matter how big or small, right? But I'll use my own
Mhm.
example. I discovered this desire and this mission to build Mother Untitled, but there is a great irony in building a platform about
Right.
empowering career pauses while you're on a career pause. So that took the constant recalibrating around how can I work within the nap times and the night times? And when my kids drop naps, okay, do I need how do I get over the guilt of hiring a babysitter for 12 hours a week so that I can keep this thing going? And, we have a lot of tools and resources around going through the reframes as well as the mindset shifts and the practical steps to getting yourself to invest in the work to make this time
Yes.
supportive to you too. And then in terms of returning, I think getting over the block, I think so much of it is we've been told that if you've taken time away from the workforce, that you're going to be overlooked. The reality is the data
Yeah.
is changing in such a significant way. Hiring managers are used to seeing career pauses now. There are so many tools like the Mom Project that help and support women in packaging up their experiences to really think about how they may return in a powerful way. But I think getting women to be able to step over the block of confidence there,
Yeah.
comes up at that time. All to say there are different, transition points on all of the phases of journey, but I do believe that there's support that we can offer at each of those stages as well.
At every stage. Well, and as you say, like, it's the gift is that it's always changing.
Mhm.
Well, and speaking of support, this tees everything up nicely, but you recently collaborated with experts in every field, from navigating parental leave, finances, psychology, maternal wellness, and more, to kind of give your community this well-rounded guidebook of people who can help them whatever phase of the journey they're in. So we dropped the link in the chat for those who are watching, so you can go to Mother Untitled and see the experts. But what inspired you to work collaboratively with these experts?
I think a couple things happen. One, I still manage my Instagram. Like I have not handed over the keys to that, mostly because I get so many personal DMs on the daily.
Yes. Well, that's how we connected, is I
Yes.
DM'd you through the Mom Project. We said,
Yes,
"Hey, can we talk?"
and I think I get a lot of women's heartfelt experiences as they
Thank
navigate
you.
the complexity of those transitions, and, uh, A, I wish I could have a coffee and a phone call with every single person. Second, I wish that every article in our library, which is very comprehensive, could address every single thing, but at some point, when women are going through the phase of resume writing, for example, after a career pause, or they are going through a challenge investing in childcare. They want to get their partner on board and they know they need it. Or they're, feeling like they can't budget for a career break, but they really want one. All of those things take more care, more nuance, and it can't be solved for in an article. It can't be solved for in a DM. The part two is I also know that not every practitioner has a lived experience with career pauses. There's a lot of
Mhm.
bias in our culture around stay-at-home mothers, and I wanted to make sure we had a directory of professionals that represented care and solutions for women across finances, across parenting, across return to work, that really did offer a safe space that women in our community could step into it and not feel any shame, not feel like they have to explain away why they took away time, but could really get to the meat of it. And so that was the reason for building it. And I think what's been really interesting is also building out the download, our toolkit, because for
Yep.
some things, people don't want the one-on-one dialogue, but they do want sort of practical worksheets to really, like we talked about, the inventory, to be able to sort of
Mhm.
audit their interest. They want to just sit down and do it on their own time. So I think it's all about meeting women where they are. If women are willing to invest in sort of that level of one-on-one care, great. If they're willing to invest time into doing the personal work on their own, then we have that resource as well.
Oh, Mother Untitled has truly like encapsulated all the things that we get questions about from our community. And I know that I use you all as a resource all the time. And I'm like, I don't think we have anything like that, but you should go check out Mother Untitled because
Mhm.
I know that they talk about that. So thank you for bringing this knowledge and the access. I think too is like people don't know where to go. They know they have a question, but they don't know how to solve that. And so you've provided this resource and Rolodex of people who are at the ready to help, and they've been vetted by you, and you understand who they are and how they can help women who are, in so many different phases of life.
Well, thank you for advocating for, caregivers returning. I think the
Yeah.
returnship programs are so powerful because I think it lessens the burden on women to have to explain the value.
Yes. Yes.
Because what these businesses are doing, from Meta to Intuit, all of your clients are saying, we understand, we get it, we understand there's a huge untapped population of intelligent, committed women, and we want to
Yes.
understand their work portfolios better. So
Yeah.
thank you for that
And
work.
who
I love
bring,
synergy
yeah,
between our communities.
same. There's so much synergy as we've talked about time and time again. But this conversation has gone by so quickly. We do have time for a Q&A. So, and I see that there's lots of questions in the chat. So thank you all for being so vocal and vulnerable. But um, we can dive in.
Great.
Okay, Lauren asks, thoughts on putting career pause on your LinkedIn profile versus leaving it open until the next thing you're ready to announce? This is a great question.
So I think there's two ways of answering this. I personally believe that you could put career pause for family life, and within that, you could put sub bullets of all of the experiences.
Mhm.
And I think the reason why, the argument as to why, when we've interviewed different uh, members of the LinkedIn community, different hiring managers, is that they're going to ask anyways. So you may as well be direct and offer an explanation right away. And as
Yeah.
we normalize the idea of career pauses, and I think the percentage is that 87% of hiring managers at this point know that they are accustomed to seeing some sort of career pause.
Mhm.
It basically gets ahead, and then you can really emphasize underneath the sort of non-traditional experiences. There's another argument that you could say you've been doing volunteer work or freelance work or project work of some capacity. No one's going to ask if you put freelancer for, X, Y, and Z. No one's going to ask if you did that 10 hours a week or 10 hours a month,
Mhm.
right? And so for some women, I know Erin Helper from the Upside would say that's a great way in which to keep yourself connected,
Mhm.
keep it centered on the professional without having to sort of introduce all the other sides. I think that it will inherently come up if you've stepped away from all sort of traditional professional experiences. So I think it sort of depends on that split between your freelance
Yeah.
and or your side project and your more traditional focus on family life.
Mhm. That's a great answer, and so nuanced, I think, but, Lauren, I
We
hope
also
that
have
provides
an
some.
article in our return. If you go to the library and you go to returning, we have a section. We have a post called "Should you put career pause on your LinkedIn profile?" So
Oh,
that, that's
Lauren,
it.
there's an article written out for you. Oh, thank you. Thanks for that question, Lauren. Danielle asks, when considering a pause, is there a length of break that employers consider a negative?
So traditional returnships, and I know, Elizabeth, you can speak to this. It's interesting because there's a sweet spot. Returnships won't consider people who've taken less than 2 years sometimes. I think some
Mhm.
meta, I think, is only
Yeah.
1 year, right? And so, it seems like that 2-year mark has become more normalized as like 2 to 5.
Yes.
I think when it becomes upward from 5 to 20, candidly,
Mhm.
we've talked to people, then it becomes, there definitely needs to be more of discussion points around what
Mhm.
those non-traditional experiences were. So I think it's not to say that it's considered negative because it's all about owning your story and telling your story and
Exactly.
packaging up all those non-traditional experiences, because I guarantee if you have raised a child, if you've been at home for, let's call it 10 years. I've interviewed a woman who was home for 12 years. She was a NASA astronaut. She moved to Waco, Texas. So she moved from the Space Coast to Waco, Texas, and ended up joining the PTA. And then her husband was a professor. So she ended up helping him weather the storm with the pandemic and learned that she was really good at transferring education, his course materials online. And so she, NASA, PTA, helping her husband. There's a lot to be said about what how those experiences can live.
Mhm.
I think there's a normalization around the 2 to 5 years, and then from 5 to
Mhm.
20, there's just more of the sort of coach. I would encourage anyone with a lengthier pause to really work with career coaches or resume coaches if that's a
Agreed.
solution available to you, or look for free content either on our site or the Mom Project to really help package up those experiences.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. I would agree about the 2 to 5, and then once you kind of go past that, and it depends on what you're doing. It depends on what that career break looks like and the activities that you're pursuing while taking that pause, and then how you can weave that story together.
I would add, because I'm actually thinking of someone I interviewed who has a child with two children with special needs. That's a different circumstance, right? So,
Exactly.
obviously, in the case of special circumstance, whether that be relocation, family relocation, special needs, there's obviously exceptions to the rule, and don't shy away from sort of within language that feels comfortable to you, including those experiences, because they demand a
Mhm.
whole different level of growth.
Absolutely. What you're doing navigating the medical system or navigating care, whether that's at school or, within the medical field, that's a whole different it's a whole new skill set that you're honing and learning. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have tips on communicating the portfolio of career experiences, both traditional and non-traditional, during interviews?
Practice. I would think about the story, obviously when you do brand work, I'll draw on that old experience. You have to look at what's true on the inside of your brand and what's true on the outside in culture. I think a lot about that when you're interviewing, what's true in your experience and what's true to the company, right? What are or the role, and what are those connection points? And then, so what's the story you're trying to tell, right? And so I would come up with a balance of experiences and highlight with real specificity a measurable project within
Yeah.
each of those. And so even if it's a non-traditional experience, right? Like sitting on my build in my community co-op, changed bus route for greater efficiency, was able to add 15 kids to our student pickup, creating more efficiency in the school system. That example, which is actually a real example that someone who I interviewed for the book lent me, could dot back to other project management skills, right? So if person was interviewing for a project manager role, they might be able to parlay that non-traditional experience with something that they also did in a more traditional environment. Like
Mhm.
basically coming up with what are the most compelling stories that illustrate my skills that are unique for this role, and write those out ahead of time, make them as measurable as possible. Find the sort of corporate speak, I hate saying that,
Yep.
that professionalizes that side project you did for your friend's law firm where you designed their brand logo,
Yes.
come up with the sort of packaging of that ahead of time. And there's nothing to say you can't just sort of string together all those experiences together in that
Mhm.
interview.
And I think too, you can look at that, you can look at the job description and say kind of what, if you know that you're right for the role, you know that both your experience in the workforce and your experience as a caregiver have crafted you as a complete whole person to apply for this. So, own that story because, mhm,
I was just gonna say own the story, but also I just occurred to me, fill in the gap. If there is a role that you're really excited about and you're like, shoot, they're really excited about SEO and I haven't touched SEO in 10 years,
yeah,
take the SEO certification class. That's one of the most incredible gifts of the internet right now, is that these things are available to you. They do cost money and they are worth, their investment, as are conferences or networking events. But if there is something you can do to fill in a gap that you think will move the needle, it'll help um, counterweight some of those non-traditional experiences with hard skills.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. I love that.
Thanks, Dana.
I'm wondering how do employers typically view taking a second career break to raise toddlers after returning to work following my first break post-pregnancy? Would they think I am unstable in my career choices?
Not without voiceover. With voiceover,
Yes.
absolutely not. I mean, there is a world, right, that depending on if you're sitting across from an 80-year-old hiring manager who has been on a very linear career track for a really long time, they may take some more education on that, right? A lot of this comes down to the person you're sitting across from. So I'm not going to answer that in broad strokes optimism and say everyone's going to get it.
Yeah.
The reality is this is very personal. I have a good friend who is the chief operating officer of Bugaboo, the stroller company. And I always think of her because she is such an exceptional example of a hiring manager who genuinely understands the value of caregivers returning to the workforce. So she hired a woman who came back after 5 years of a career pause. So she is, the exception, not the rule, but looking for those family-friendly businesses, looking for women-led
Yes.
businesses who get it is a huge win right away. So you're gonna get get a little bit more understanding based on the environment you're stepping into. The second part is, as we're shifting in this climate where there are more people existing in the in between, in the freelance, in the consulting space, where there are more layoffs, I hate to say it, you're looking at more normalcy around and normalization of career pauses in general. I also think there's a lot of discussion in the public eye about the intensity of parenting. So we're going to, in the next 3 to 5 years, I think we're just going to continue to see the sort of acceptance of career breaks just continue to grow. And I think repeat career breaks for different
Mhm.
junctures in caregiving, especially, by the way, we're a generation that is about to age into
Yes.
sandwich
100. Yes.
So we're taking care of seniors as well. So, as long as we are really practiced in how we speak with confidence about our time away from the traditional workforce, the reason why, and how we stayed connected, I think same answer as before.
I wholeheartedly agree. Well, and how did we only have 5 minutes left? But I do want to say, Neha, will you talk a little bit about your book coming out?
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. Yes, the book is called The Power Pause. It comes out with Penguin Random House, Putnam, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House, I should say, on January 14th of 2025. And the book is really a first of its kind guide for women preparing for and walking through a career pause and coming out the other side, connected to a sense of possibility and exploration and opportunity. And we're really excited about it. I think it's going to really plant a flag that it's time to re-examine the narrative in a huge way. Available for pre-order in the next couple of weeks, and you'll be hearing a lot more from me about it over the next 8 months.
Well, and we will be talking about it too. I can't wait. I know the Mom Project can't wait. We are so excited to share this with our community too. So we're so excited.
Thank you. Thank you. It
I'm
does
so
feel
proud
like
of
a
you.
long time coming.
Yes.
But I will share just on a personal note, because we have a couple of minutes. For anyone who is in their season of pausing or holding on to sort of part-time or project work and wanting it to go faster or be bigger, when I started Mother Untitled, like I said, I was really fully at home with kids, and I was fully at home for 5 years. And I remember just looking around thinking, this is going to be big. This needs to be big. This country needs it. This culture needs it. But there was no way it could be bigger than a blog and an Instagram at that time. And then I remember I stepped into 2020 thinking, well, this is going to be my year. And it still wasn't. And then in 2021, my kids aged into school and culture was ready for re-examination. And I think if I had tried to sell this book concept any year before, I would have never gotten the deal I got. I would have never gotten to be able to bring it to these kinds of stages because culture wasn't ready for it. It just wasn't. And I think timing is everything. Allow yourself to plant the seeds and stay connected in a way that feels meaningful. And it's a long game. It's a really long game.
That is such amazing advice and speaks to everything that we talked about today, knowing that everything is fluid. It's this moment in time, and just it's the long game. We are so excited for your book. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. You speak about the pause and the gray area with such care and consideration and knowledge and respect. And we can't thank you enough for joining us and sharing your words of wisdom on the career pause and beyond. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope that you learned something that you can take with you on your career journey and beyond. As a reminder, there are a ton of resources on Mother Untitled, so we encourage you to go check it out. Follow Neha if you don't already, which I'm sure all of you do. And then also, the Mom Project is always a resource. We have a lot of blog articles on our library as well. And stay tuned. We're working on a collaborative content piece with Mother Untitled coming out later this month about kind of all the things that you need to do in advocating for flexibility, career breaks, and more. So we'll be sharing that in the coming weeks. But thank you again for joining us. We'll see you at the next one. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.